deadline for applications is the 22nd of May. After that, then there's a 25 calendar day period where people can continue to apply, but they incur a slight penalty reduction for their first year's payment. But the absolute deadline is the 16th of June. There'll be no applications accepted after that fact.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode, I'm joined by Peter Harte from the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine to discuss the new Suckler Carbon Efficiency programme. Peter, you're very welcome. The Beef Data Genomics programme came to an end in December, and the new programme, the Suckler Carbon Efficiency programme, was launched earlier this week. What does the new programme entail?
Yes, SCEP, so it launched this week, and it looks to continue on the positives that were built or delivered by BDGP, but at the same time it introduces some new actions, or at least new to the genomics side of it, that we hope will help to deliver on programme goals. A lot of the actions in the programme will be very, very familiar to anybody who participated in BDGP or indeed in BPS over the last couple of years, who are both very popular schemes, So essentially that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to build on progress that has been made over the last number of years.
And what eligibility requirement does the farmer have to fulfil in order to participate?
Well, on a basic level, they need to be a herd owner first and foremost. So they have to be over 18 years of age, and they have to be farming a holding that has a BIS application submitted for each year of the programme. And that's an eligibility criteria that you have to have a BIS application in. On top of that, they need to produce a minimum of 50% of their annual reference figure of eligible calves each year. And that's new over what was in BDGP. In BDGP, technically, you didn't need to calve down anything, but here it's a breeding scheme, it's a genomic scheme. You need to be producing calves. So 50% of your annual reference figure needs to be produced every year. And then I suppose the contentious bit is that you need to be a continuous member of SBLAS. That's the Sustainable Beef and Lamb Quality Assurance Scheme. So you need to be quality assured with Bord Bia. And there's been a lot of, I suppose, resistance and feedback to that particular element. But again, that's an eligibility criteria, and it's going to be there for the duration of the scheme.
And for farmers that are currently not quality assured, how do they go about applying, and how long have they to get quality assured?
They have to be a fully approved member of SBLAS by the 16th of October 2023, and then to maintain that membership for the duration of the programme. It's a 5-year programme, and they need to make sure that they don't let that lapse for any period of time over those 5 years. We originally had insisted that you had to be SBLAS approved before you applied, but due to the number of people we saw that had to apply and the kind of the backlog that was likely to be, we've pushed that back now to the absolute latest, which is the 16th of October. So the application needs to be in and accepted, and you have to have the audit carried out before the 16th of October. It's not enough to get in touch with Bord Bia on the 15th and think that it's going to be okay. It's not. On the 16th, we'll be contacting Bord Bia for a list of all the people who have signed up and who have been accepted into SBLAS, and that'll be the basis then. And anybody who hasn't at that stage won't be allowed to continue in the programme. Bord Bia have a help desk. The number is 01 524 0410, and they'll send you out a pack, and they'll be able to guide you through the process. It isn't that onerous. We're starting a range of information meetings over the next few weeks on the far side of Easter, and Bord Bia will be participating in that. They will be doing presentations at it, but they'll also have staff on hand to take applications on the night from anybody who's interested and who needs to sign up to it. That's
a great help, Peter. You mentioned there the reference number. How is the reference number of cows calculated for the programme?
Yeah, so again, we base payments on historical production, if you like, on a holding as much as we can. So it needs to be representative of what the output on the holding, because ultimately we can't pay people to expand, if you like, that we can only hold it on the basis of what they've historically produced. For BDGP, the reference year was 2014. That caused issues for a number of people because they may have had a problem with TB, they may have had it destocked for one reason or another. So here what we've done is, in order to kind of to level out any peaks or troughs there might be, what we're doing is we're looking at what was produced on the holdings between 2016 and 2021. So those 6 years, and we take the best 3 years, and that is the number of suckler cows that calved on the holding within that period. And we get an average of those 3 years to produce a reference figure. So with that, we hope to be even more representative than what was there before. And if somebody had a really good year, they might get a reference figure that's slightly low. But similarly, if somebody had 1 or 2 years where they didn't produce as much as they would plan to produce, by going with the 3 years, it should be more representative of what they're doing. Okay, so the 3 years, and it's the number of eligible cows that produce an eligible calf, so suckler cows really. And then participants, when they're signing up, they can declare up to that number as their program reference. So for instance, somebody might have a reference figure that's been given to them of maybe 25, but when they look at the targets that are required over the years, or maybe they have a plan on the holding, or maybe they've got some rented land that they're going to lose access to, or whatever it might be, they can actually reduce that figure downwards. So they might set it at 20 for the program. And then each year there is also the ability that you can log in January and actually tweak it up or down. Because again, it was one of the criticisms of BDGP that when people signed up to it, they were set a reference figure and targets that were based on that reference figure for the following 6 years. And 5 years into the program, they found that they couldn't meet them, or could only meet them with difficulty. So we've brought in flexibility that allows participants to drop that reference figure year on year and bring it back up to where they want it to be, to reflect the reality of the farming on their holding at that time.
And can an individual change system within the 5 years, Peter, without a clawback then?
Well, they can, if provided they meet the scheme requirements. So obviously we're going to go on and we'll talk about the various actions that have to be carried out under the scheme. But all those actions, for the most part, they hang off the targets that are set against the reference figure, whether it's calving down 50%, whether it's the genotyping amount, whether it's what they have to have in terms of sires and 4 or 5 star sires and replacement dams. All those targets are calculated from the annual reference figure that the farmer sets. So if you've got somebody with, say, for instance, who is starting the process of moving into dairying, that wasn't under BDGP. That wasn't something that was really compatible with it. You couldn't meet scheme requirements and continue into dairying without difficulty. But here, what we have is you have the ability where they can reduce down their reference number, so reducing all the targets that they hit, which allows them to, and it might necessarily be dairying, that's just because that's been a popular transition over the last couple of years. But it could be somebody who maybe is of an age where they're starting to dial back on the amount of farming that they're doing, and they're maybe going into pure dry stock, that they don't want to be in the business of calving anymore. They can still meet their program targets, albeit that their payment will reduce, but their targets will reduce to match whatever reference figure they've set for the year. So we're hoping that this flexibility will allow people freedom to farm in the way that they want to. So we're not restricting them purely to the numbers that they set in year one, that there's a little bit of wriggle room there, there's flexibility there, that they can move from one farming system to another, whether it's towards making life easier on themselves and moving out of the calving and cattle, or whether it's moving into a different system altogether, or maybe even if they're expanding into another area, like if they're going into dairying or whatever else. Because ultimately, the SCEP is a 5-year commitment. So people who are signing up in year one need to be mindful of that, and they need to plan in advance and be careful when they're signing up to it that they're actually going to be able to meet the criteria. But as I said, we're very confident that the flexibility with regards to the reference figures and the reference years is going to be a big help for people who, may have plans they might see through, they mightn't see through, whatever it is, but at least it gives them more options going forward.
Peter, there are a number of actions that farmers have to complete. What are they?
Okay, well, apart from the eligibility criteria that I mentioned earlier, there's also then there's key actions that are in relation to replacement sires, replacement dams, genotyping, and then weighing of the calf-cow pairs, which would be something we had in beef for the last number of years, but is coming in here. And similarly, then there's also the submissions of surveys and data, and that would have been something that was a feature of BDGP as well.
And can you talk to the replacement strategy for the sire and the dam, and what requirements are needed that way for the scheme?
Yeah, so in each scheme year, applicants have to calve down at least 50%. We've already discussed that. And then in years 1 and 2, in scheme years 1 and 2, 80% of the calves that are produced, they have to have been sired from a 4 or 5 star source. In other words, a 4 or 5 star genotype bull, or 4 or 5 star straws that were 4 or 5 star rated when they were served. So again, this was an issue under BDGP, where in 2019 you had to have a 4 or 5 star bull on your holding on the 30th of June, or if you used AI, 80% of the straws had to come from a 4 or 5 star source. But it was the people who actually did a mixture of both that there was issues, because they didn't realize they had to actually tick both boxes. So all we're doing here is, we don't really mind whether you use a stock bull, whether you use AI, or whatever mixture of both of those, as long as 80% of the calves come from that kind of a source. So it's a little bit more flexibility, it's a little bit more clarity, I suppose. But the target is 80% in the first 2 years, but there's a derogation in year 1 from that, because we have animals that are currently been born, if you like, in the scheme year, where farmers weren't aware of the requirement when they were serving cattle or whatever else it might be. But the target increases then in years 3 and 4 to 85%, and in year 5 it's 90%. So they're quite high targets. There'll be farmers who will find that a challenge because it's over and above what was in BDGP, but it needed to be. We needed to have a little bit more ambition in this scheme in order to get it over the line with the Commission. But I think for the vast majority of people who are in BDGP and farmers who have, should we say, bought into the idea of genomics and the star ratings, etc., they're probably going to have no difficulty in hitting these figures because they would have been doing it anyway. And then for the dams replacement, they're required to ensure that by the 31st of October 2023, at least 50% of their yearly reference number are eligible females that are genotyped at 4 or 5 stars. This increases to 65% on the 31st of October 2025, and then 75% on the 31st of October 2027. So again, we had in BDGP in 2020 on the 31st of October, they needed to have 50% of their number. So again, these targets are increasing and they're going higher. And again, it'll be a challenge, but similarly with the sires, I think somebody who's been involved in BDGP or somebody who's bought into the genomic side of it, they're going to be doing this anyway, and this is basically going to copper fasten decisions that they've already made.
And for farmers that are used to weighing stock, as you mentioned earlier previously for BPS, in relation to the weight recording action, what must the farmer do to comply?
Yeah, so participants have to weigh at least 80% of the eligible calves that are born in the holding. So it's 80% of the reference number in each year and the dams, and submit the weights to ICBF as they did with BPS. So it'll be the same systems that will be there. There'll still be scales available through ICOS, etc. for rental. They can use their own scales. They can borrow a set of scales from a neighbor, or they can bring somebody in who might be offering a weighing service and they can do it for them. And in the same way that there was various forms of uploading the data to ICBF, whether you used, it was MyBeep, I think at the time, I think it's now myweighing.ie, but they could also, ICBF would produce paper forms if you wanted them to, and all of that remains the same. And BPS was quite popular. An awful lot of people participated in it and had no issue in getting those weights in. And we know that there's a huge amount of farmers have gone out and purchased their own scales, and I know that there's grants available through TAMS for that. And it should be straightforward enough. We had whatever it was, we had 26,000 farmers participated in BPS last year. So I think that element of SCEP, while it's new to the genomic side, I think the vast majority of participants will be well versed in exactly what's required.
That's great, Peter. And for the data recording action, is it similar to previous surveys farmers completed, or is there additional information that they've been needing?
It's broadly the same. We've kind of changed, if you like, some of the data that we're looking for, but the process is the same. They'll still have their calf book that will come out from ICBF, and then we're looking for details like the calf sire, calving ease, the birth size and calf vigor, calf quality, the calf docility, the dam milking ability, the dam's mothering ability, and then dam's feet and legs, the dam's teat score and dam's udder score. So some of those are slightly changed, purely because we've moved on in some areas, and ICBF were anxious to gather in some new data. But in terms then of uploading that data, etc., all of that is the same as what it was, more or less. It still goes up to ICBF, and we still go ahead and pay on that basis. So it's useful information for ourselves, and it's useful information from ICBF, and a lot of that and the requirements that will be there will be covered in the training that will come as part of the scheme.
And finally, in relation to the genotyping action, what do farmers need to do to satisfy this action?
So applicants will be required to take a tissue tag sample from animals selected for genotyping. So much like with BDGP, farmers will be sent out a list of targets for genotyping. They'll have a few weeks where they can amend that if they want to, that they can change it and interact or liaise with ICBF to change it. But the number of animals to be genotyped each year will be at least equivalent to 70% of their yearly reference number. So that's the target. The existing tag suppliers will be retained as we had under BDGP. If somebody doesn't have an existing tag supplier, somebody's new to it, they'll need to contact ICBF and to actually nominate a tag supplier, so the tags will be sent out. And in the same way with BDGP, participants are liable for the cost of genotyping, albeit that we pay it up front for them to ICBF, and then we recoup it from their payments at the end of the year. So the farmer doesn't really have to pay out anything. It's recouped from their payment at the end of the year, but we pay for it as it goes through the year as the tags are sent out and the genotyping takes place.
And what is the rate of payment for the scheme, Peter?
As with BDGP, it's a decoupled scheme. So while people are always anxious to find out how much they're getting paid by an animal, it's actually, we pay on land really. And so while the reference figure is determined from suckler cows that calved in 2016 to 2021, we ultimately make payments on the lands that are declared on BIS. So provided all requirements in the program are met, and that's the genotyping, etc., a payment is made of €225 for the first 15 hectares and €180 for the remaining hectares up to the maximum payable area. So for an example, if somebody had, we'll say 20 suckler cows as the reference number, we would divide that reference number by 1.5, which gives us our maximum payable area. And in that instance, it would be 13.3 hectares. So they need to declare a minimum of that. So they need to declare a minimum of 13.3 hectares on their BIS application of eligible forage area. And then they'll be paid €225 per hectare on that 13.3 up to, and if it was 15, they'd be paid 225 on 15. If it was 20, they'd be paid 225 on 15, and then they'd be paid 180 in the remaining 5. So the average payment, or the payment in that instance for somebody with a reference of 20, would be around just short of €3,000. So you're looking at, it's a significant increase over what they were paid under BDGP. That being said, there's more measures that are there, specifically the weighing measure where a farmer has to be compensated for the income forgone and the cost incurred of getting a set of scales in and weighing the animals in the year. But it's a significant enough payment and attractive enough payment in its own right.
Most definitely. And you mentioned earlier, if a farmer fails to meet any of those actions that you've outlined, are there penalties involved?
There are. Well, like there's more weight, if you like, placed on the genomics and the sires part of it than there are, we'll say, to the data recording and the weighing. So they have a different penalty structure. But the one of the downfalls there was, not even necessarily a downfall, one of the shortcomings there was with BDGP was that we didn't accurately define, if you like, what would happen when certain actions didn't take place, or if there was repeated or continuous failure to meet certain actions. And we've kind of dealt with that in the terms and conditions here. But if somebody doesn't carry out an action, they obviously can't be paid for that action. If they continue not to meet that action, they won't be paid, and they'll possibly see an increase in the penalty. But if there are a number of actions there, like the genomics, etc., if they don't carry them out and they're found or they're deemed to be non-compliant or non-participants in the scheme, they will be removed. So it's a 5-year commitment, and participants need to be mindful of that when they sign up. We have penalties there if they don't carry out those actions, and they'll have to be applied if they don't.
How do farmers go about applying for the programme, Peter, and what is the closing date?
Yeah, so the deadline for applications is the 22nd of May. After that, then there's a 25 calendar day period where people can continue to apply, but they incur a slight penalty reduction for their first year's payment. But the absolute deadline is the 16th of June. There'll be no applications accepted after that fact. Applications can only be submitted online via AgFood, either by the farmer themselves or by a FOSS advisor authorised to act on their behalf. It's a very straightforward and quick process. There's only about 3 pages involved, where essentially you declare your scheme reference, you declare your annual reference for the first year, and then you exceed, if you like, or you agree to the terms and conditions of the scheme, and you agree to the GDPR provisions that are there, and that's it. And just make sure to hit the submit button to make sure that it's in. It's very, very straightforward. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. But I would say to people to read the terms and conditions first and to get themselves up to speed on exactly what's required of the scheme. And in some cases, I think schemes like this, there's always a fair bit of noise that comes around, whether like with BDGP, it was over the star ratings. I think there's probably going to be a lot of resistance to SCEP on the board BIA piece and the requirement that's there. But I'd encourage farmers to make up their own mind, to go in and have a look at the payment rates, to have a look at the actions that are there, to have a look and maybe consider what benefits there might be from this scheme going forward on their holding, and to make the decision for themselves on their holding, rather than maybe be beholden to other people who may have opinions based on other facts or other ideas.
And there are a number of information meetings arranged that you mentioned earlier for farmers to get more information, and I'll include the link in the podcast text for the upcoming events.
That's right. We have on Thursday the 23rd, we're in Tuam in the Ardree Hotel, and there'll be department staff there. We'll go through the terms and conditions. We'll go through the application screens. We'll also have staff there from ICBF that will go through the various star ratings and what it means for farmers. And we'll have staff there from Board BIA, who again will go through the ins and outs of the SBLAS. There'll also be department staff there who will manage your application for you if you want. And similarly, there'll be people there from SBLAS who will, or from Board BIA, who will be able to sort out your application as well for that side of it. So the first one there, or the next one is in Tuam in the Ardrey Hotel on Thursday the 23rd. Then we're in Ennis and Tracy's West County Hotel on March 28th. We're in the New Park Hotel in Kilkenny on March 29th. The Landmark Hotel in Carrigan-Shannon on March 30th. Then we take a break for Easter and we're back on April the 18th in the West Lodge in Bantry. On April 20th, we're in Tralee in the Bandon Hotel. On May the 2nd, we're in Letterkenny, the Mount Errigal, and then we finish up on May the 3rd in the Great National Hotel in Ballina.
That's great, Peter. Thanks very much, and hopefully farmers will be able to attend one of those information evenings.
That's great.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Peter for joining me on the show. Teagasc are hosting a series of breeding walks across the country over the coming month. Check out the Teagasc website for further details. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan and thanks for listening.